Hello, everybody. Welcome to Drunk with Questions. I'm Gooch.
And I'm Raj. Join us as we navigate the complexities of life. Here, alcohol may not be the answer, but it's sure as hell worth a shot.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Drunk with Questions, the talk show where ordinary people talk about extraordinary topics. Today, I've got Raj and Spicer with me. Very exciting, very exciting. It's been a hot minute. Did I say you could talk? No.
I'm sorry, master. I don't want no troubles.
Canceled. But yeah, it's been a hot minute. We've all been super busy. We're all dealing with our own personal things, and
Life.
Good example. Yeah, I'm running for city council in my city that I live in that we have never disclosed, so I won't. But I'm sure you could connect it if you know and have listened to this podcast. You can probably figure it out really easly.
Go Google.
Yeah, we're not. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
The only thing I'm running for is away from my problems.
But today we're going to talk about the Russia-Ukraine war, quote unquote. I guess you could call it. Conflict would be a better term, I guess. But as we've been doing this season, we're going to start off with a thought experiment just to get us kind of awake and in the argumentative mood. So today I have thought a great deal of this, and I think you guys will fight me very hard on it because I have a true belief on this. If a tree falls in the woods and no one's here to hear it, does it make a sound?
Absolutely, it makes a sound.
You freaking played me. I knew it was going to be something like this.
It's such a simple one, but...
Does it, though?
Yes, it's so simple, because the sound...
But if nothing can hear it, is there a sound still?
So, I mean, I have also thought long and hard of this, which tells you where the state of my life is going.
How long? How long can you think about this and not be like, yes?
So it's one of those things where on the one hand you're like getting all philosophical about it, and you're like, no, it doesn't make a sound because sound's just the interpretation of us hearing the audio waves and everything like that. But I mean, given the fact that sound has its own vibrations and reverberations, like technically it exists. Like there's some transfer of energy regardless of whether you can hear it or not. So that's more on the actual like scientific logical side of it.
Does it constitute as sound though? If there's so if there, I'm saying not just a person, like there's nothing around to hear it, right? Nothing. So does it still constitute as sound though? Or are they just waves in the air?
Okay, that's an interesting proposition.
That's a no, because I could leave a recorder there. There's no living being there. I can just leave a recorder, which is a machine, and I'll record a sound.
That's fair. That's fair. That's a good.
So that tells us that it's not like a something that we hear just from our own senses. Like it's recorded.
But what you're saying is my argument would have been more valid, what I just stated 50 years ago, 60 years ago, before like recording devices were really a thing. I guess 100. Movies are like 100 years old now.
Well, so. I guess that's not entirely true. There have been examples of primitive sounds being, not primitive, but like ancient sounds being recorded on like almost like an early record system where the vibrations are measured by a little reed stylus that's on like a clay disc.
But was it a sound?
I mean,
or was it just vibrations and then we turned it into a sound?
So I looked up the definition of sound in the Oxford Language Dictionary definition, and it says vibrations that travel through the air or of another medium that can be heard when they reach a person's or animal's ear.
So sound is the vibration that you're describing.
Yeah, so
but the dictionary
I
stating that it has to hit an ear.
I know where you're
going.
It
doesn't say that it sounds when it hits the ear.
And can be heard when they reach a person's or animal's ear. It doesn't say they have to be heard. So I would say the vibrations are classified as the sound. They're just interpreted audibly if they reach a person or animal's ear. Or whatever a bug uses.
When two things hit, a tree falls, hits the ground, there's a transfer of energy that happens, and that transfer of energy creates a ripples that we hear a sound. doesn't matter what happened 50 years ago or 500 years ago. The fact that we can hear it now using a tape recorder means that you could have heard it 50 years ago or 100 years ago.
So in space, if something detonates, like a missile, we'll say, which, wow, that is right on par for this conversation. But if a missile detonates in space, there's still a shockwave, right?
Yeah.
Which is a vibration. So if you're in a spaceship and it detonates and that shockwave comes towards you, it's going to shake the ship, right? But technically that's supposed to be sound. But there's just no medium for it to be transferred through because there's nothing in space, right?
I'd say
it's still sound, though.
It's
still sound.
It is?
I'd classify it as a simple wave in space only purely because here's my rationale for it. In space, if that were to happen, it's in a vacuum and there's no medium for it to travel through, which is a core part of the definition when the vibrations and the waves travel through something.
Now, here's the thing. When the wave hits whatever you're traveling in, it causes the aircraft to shudder or make noise. That is the sound you're hearing from the wave. The medium is the aircraft or whatever you're traveling in, and it's turning those waves into sound for you.
What if it detonates, though, and there's no aircraft for it to go through?
Then it'll travel to wherever it needs to go until it reaches a point where it dissipates.
Or it becomes sound.
So I looked up the Merriam-Webster definition here. And according to this, the first three that show up: a particular auditory impression, the sensation perceived by the sense of hearing, or mechanical radiant energy that is transmitted by longitudinal pressure waves in a material medium such as air and is the objective cause of hearing.
Interesting. Trying to break that down in my head.
So hearing is a consequence of those sound waves hitting our eardrums.
Yes.
That's all it is. Yeah.
Right. It's not core to the definition of the sound itself. It's merely the interpretation.
Have you seen the video where people put sand on a speaker?
Yeah, and it turns into specific.
Oh, dude, that stuff's crazy.
Yes.
It's
so
pretty dope. I love
very specific, like mathematical, like figures and systems that you can exactly what each sound means. So like that means that each sound has its own variation, and it's almost like the language of sound, other than just our audible language. Like an actual mathematical scientific language to sound is based on each of these designs that you have. So sound doesn't need an ear to hear it. It is there. If
it is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is. If there's somebody with an ear that can turn those waves into a sound, great. If not, it just travels. It's hard for you to say, like, scientifically, based on everything that we know, that sound it's not like sound is Schrodinger's cat. Like, it's not like, oh, if it's there and if you can't see it, you don't know if it exists or not. It's a scientifically tested thing that no matter where you are in the world, there's a reason that even though we're nowhere near the explosion of two stars creating a supernova, we feel the vibrations here on Earth with those deep gravity chambers that they've built. So it's like, it doesn't really matter where you are and where the sound happens. Eventually those ripples will get to you.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
Yeah.
Well, and as somebody who doesn't really study quantum physics, when you start diving deep into like the Schrodinger's cat experiment, man, that goes down a rabbit hole. Like the whole principle in quantum theory about the observation itself is one of the determining factors on whether it's state of being.
Oh, that's a mind fuck, because you're basically looking at it like I think the best way I had it described to me is when something falls between your seat and the center console, and you're reaching for the item, and the very act of reaching for the item and you're between your seat and center console spreads it and makes it go deeper down.
That's
so
good.
Because the very fact of you putting action into trying to get it is causing it to get further away from you. So it's just like, that's a great way to describe that. Observation bias, basically. It's just you think you see something when it's not.
Well played, Magic Man.
All right, well, that was really good. That kind of got me jazzed up in the brain area.
That really got me jazzed up to talk about like international conflicts.
Yeah, man.
if a nuclear weapon goes off in northeast Ukraine and nobody is here to talk about it,
Yeah.
did it really happen? Yes.
Yeah. Did tiger shit in woods?
So I think the first thing I would like to talk about, as a follow-up to what we spoke about, I don't even know how long it would have been.
Dude, it's been
less than a year, but a couple months. So I've seen a lot of stuff on various platforms, and one of the interesting things that I have come across is that when in the original episode that we were talking about, I theorized that Putin was sick, and that he was attempting to establish some sort of a legacy or something that they would talk about when his bust is sitting in a museum next to all the other great Russian leaders, right? And a capturing of half of Ukraine and recreating the buffer zone between NATO and Russia. That would be pretty good, I think, if you died on that. I mean, in Russian terms, it's no, realigning the entire continent or anything like that, but for what you could get done nowadays as far as conquests are concerned, it would be pretty good. Some of the things that I've seen and that I've learned is that apparently Russia is hurting really bad socially, and I mean their people in general, to a point where when you consider their birth rate and the available jobs that are actually in that country, and some other smaller factors, the deficit of the ruble and all that stuff, it turns out that Russia actually, as a country, the way they're going right now, cannot survive past 2045. So hold on before you me.
It's coming.
So it makes sense. So to me, it makes sense. So in that region, there's well, in the entire world, but in that region specifically, there's been a power shift, right? We have been afraid of Russia, the United States, and a lot of NATO countries for a lot of years, even after post-Cold War, technically, which was like 91, 92. Well, that was the fall of the Soviet Union, but whatever. And we've always been afraid of them. Don't poke the bear. Don't poke the bear. We don't want to see what's going to happen, right? And so now the bear gets poked with this conflict. And we actually see how weak they are. Like, they are not a strong nation. And, maybe the U.S. would kind of be the same way if it was going right next door to us, but it doesn't matter what it would happen to us because it's happening to them, right? They're in the news, not us right now. So you see this, you see how weak they are, especially just a couple days ago, they had their Victory Day parade and one tank rode down the street, right? Because they have sent all the other ones to the front lines. And Ukraine thought it was funny that they only had one older tank. So they grabbed a ton of the blown up tanks. They dragged them to the main street in Kiev and lined them up. It was like 120 tanks that they got, and it's all blown up Russian tanks. So we're seeing that there's a power shift, right? Right now, the strongest country, I think, or that could be perceived, would be China. Stronger economy. I don't know if I'd call it stronger social, but stronger economy.
Yeah, I'm not saying like strong country, but definitely stronger than what Russia is right now.
And so people think that if and when Russia, quote unquote, loses this conflict, that Putin will either step down, but they don't think that's what would happen, or there would be an uprising from radical right-wing Russian extremists, which I don't know enough about Russian politics to know exactly what they're right-wing, but I'm going to assume it's just like
I'm assuming it's the
Russia.
opposite of what's going on now.
Yeah, so it's like all Russia all the time, fix Russia. I'm going to assume
Yeah.
is what radicalism is.
Wagner
Russia-
Group.
Yeah.
Wagner
Russia-
Group is
make
red.
Russia-
Is red
Okay.
Russian
Make-
radical.
Make
So-
Russia Soviet again.
They listed a bunch of names of people that could take Putin's place. And the final outcome of all of this would be that Russia would be a weak shell extension of China with this power shift. And that's crazy to think about, that we have been talking about how a lot of these really strong countries are going through their like official kind of death of a empire stage, right? Great Britain was the most recent one. US and Russia kind of took that place, and Russia's been on a decline way quicker than the US has. I'm not saying the US isn't on a decline, but Russia has definitely been on a quicker decline.
Oh, 100%.
Which means they're going to go first. And someone has to take their place, and that's China.
Fair.
And we were talking a couple days ago that with everything that's in the US, business, electronics, right? Silicon Valley. Hell, you can even think of like Hollywood, right? Like, I know there's Bollywood and there's other movie productions, but we have movie production in the US that is worldwide, wide-ranging.
Oh, it leads the world.
Right. And so we were talking about, even if the US is on a decline, can they fail? Like, can they go the route of Great Britain, France before them, Spain before them, the Ottoman Empire before them, the Romans, Greeks, whatever before them? Can the US collapse and the world be the same afterwards? And I would say no. I think there could be a power switch. I just don't know who would take the reins on that right now. But I don't know if the US could fail. What I'm getting at is Russia could fail. And I'm not
100%.
I'm not saying that they don't drive the economy, because they definitely do. I mean, there's a lot of industrialism. There's a decent amount of farming in Russia. But they drive the economy for East Europe and China, right? And India, maybe a little bit. But they could fail. And it would hurt the market, the world market, but it wouldn't be a total collapse as if a
It's not
US
catastrophic.
fell. So I'll turn it over to you guys now after stating my point. I think we're seeing the very early stages of the fall of what we grew up and what our parents grew up and even what our grandparents grew up as knowing what Russia is. I think Russia is going to be seen in the next 40 years what we see Great Britain now, right? Because way back in the day, Great Britain was like, don't mess with them, right? They are the top dog. And now it's like, whatever. I mean, they're our allies, but we wouldn't be afraid to poke that bear. I think that's what we're seeing with Russia now. So
it's an interesting philosophical argument whether or not the decline would happen to America. I mean, let me start off with that question in itself. Is it possible for America to fall like a lot of these other countries have? My educated reaction is no. The main reason being, every major civilization that has fallen so far has been an authoritarian civilization. The Romans technically had a Senate and they technically had, a democratic system, but the ruler was always the one in charge. Their democracy is kind of like how China has some democracy, or how, Russia, it was elected democratically. It's not the same. I think the biggest thing that the US has is that the people still have a lot of power over what happens and there's an open flow of information. Sometimes a little too much information, sometimes not accurate information, but there is an open flow of information. In a lot of these countries, these authoritarian countries that have fallen and gone into complete disrepair, it's been authoritarian leaders with authoritarian control over media, over education, with a system of indoctrination where ideas aren't allowed to flourish, where economy is held hostage by the government. I feel like a lot of people think that China is on the rise and China is going to just continue to go the way it is. But if you look at the systems in China, how it's set up right now, China's on the brink of failure. One bad economic situation in China can bring down everything. 70% of the wealth in China is held in real estate. And the real estate market is hanging on by a thread. So when you're looking at that, you have to take into account, holy crap, like, okay, China's great now, but what about 10 days from now? What happens if they, like, a lot of these builders are now defaulting, that they keep building? Have you seen in China, they have entire cities built up with nobody living in them?
Yeah, it's
so they have
a
a
shell.
Yeah, they just have a situation with a bunch of people living in these areas, but nobody's actually, like, or they have these buildings built up, but nobody's actually living there. And the main issue is that, like, okay, they built all this stuff for profit because they never thought that the value of homes could ever go down. But it's gotten to the point where nobody can afford these houses anymore. Like, entire families are having to pool money together to buy an apartment. Not to mention their major gender issue that they're having right now with not enough females for males because of their one-child policy. Like, their social policies are coming back. Yes, they still have major North Korea syndrome with their information.
100%.
Yeah, so like, these countries that we think are so great and powerful, they don't actually have any democracy. So even though they're a socialist country, they have strict rules. Even though they're supposed to be all for one for all socialism, there's only one person in charge and one party in charge, and you have to live under their rule whether you like it or not.
Yeah,
so these kind of countries cannot succeed. History has told us these kind of countries will not succeed. 200 years ago, the greatest social experiment the world has ever seen happened in the United States. It created the biggest, most powerful country the world has ever seen. And that country has become the leader of the world, not because of its firepower, not because of what it can do militarily, but because what it can do in terms of culture.
I mean, the firepower did help.
It does, but the culture of America spreads a lot more than anything else.
Oh, culture is our biggest export.
We set the culture around the world. Everybody follows what Americans are doing. Everybody follows what Hollywood is an extent of our culture. Music is an extent of our culture. Hip hop is being used in countries in Asia to fight autocratic governments right now.
I mean, being the melting pot, we've taken in so many different nationalities from across the world and become this, it just embraced the best parts of each of these other cultures for the most part. And, it just becomes kind of its own thing after a while. I'm not saying people don't have their own individual cultures, but we embrace it as like a general American culture, and that's the export to the rest of the world.
I mean, like, our Statue of Liberty's first sentence is, "Give me your tired and hungry. Give me your huddled masses." Because we understand that those are the people that are hungry to succeed. And if you don't want them, we'll take them, and they can be successful here and contribute to America. Like, there's a lot of immigrants nowadays that, even though they were, from another country, like, they feel more in tuned with what America is.
Oh yeah, if you actually look at some of the interviews of different nationalities from across the world that emigrate here, that see people that are at least of a similar ethnicity of them, and the way they act in America, they're like, this is ridiculous. These people are spoiled. Like, they're complaining about all these little things, and they think they're dealing with such a harsh reality. They're like, you should look at where I just came from.
And it's true. I mean, you come from, there's plenty of people. I mean, even you, Gooch, I mean, you went to MSU. You saw the influx of Asian students to MSU. And I mean, people come from all around the world for education. They might go back. China loves to educate their children here and then send them back to China. So so we're importing education, we're importing music, we're exporting music, we're exporting education, we're exporting all these goods. But here's what does not happen to us: we're not having a brain drain. Nobody's leaving America because there aren't enough opportunities.
No, in fact, there's actually plenty of like job opportunities right now, as well as like just anybody's opportunity. The philanthropic like spirit, the being a philanthropist or an entrepreneur, you know, just is so pervasive in America that anybody can come up with an idea in a garage. I mean, for example, that's how Amazon got started. Yeah, I know the owner came from Wall Street, and they started it together, him and his ex. At least I think that's how it went. They're selling books out of a garage, and now Amazon is like one of the leading, if not the leading company worldwide for distribution of goods and services.
Yeah. And that's the difference, I think, in terms of the United States versus these countries, is that we export a lot, but we also do not export our talent, our people. Our people never go to another country. People in Russia, like, I understand Russia has this idea of being hard and we're hard people and we don't need all that stuff. You give a Russian guy a mansion, he's going to love it. And if you take that mansion away from him, he's going to hate it and he's going to want that mansion back, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, there are people up in the northern part of like Siberia that, they're still living off the land, like they're hard people and stuff like that.
But they don't know any better.
No, but I mean, like, it's not that they're uncivilized. Like, I've seen like documentaries of some of these towns and stuff, but it's like it's a harsh reality in that part of the world. And so, but it's people have become westernized across a lot of these countries. Yeah, and that's what happens with like, it's not that these people are tougher, that we're any tougher. It's like you get used to the comforts of the world. You take the comforts away, you want them back.
And it doesn't matter. Like, India is the largest democracy by population in the world, and they still have major brain drain. It's 100%. Just the way it is. Like, and democracy itself does not give you the right to be successful. I mean, it's almost like evolution. You have to adapt. You have to adapt to the situation that you're in, and then only the fittest survive.
Well, like
the ones that can't adapt can't.
We import talent, we don't export the talent. Like, these people that come for our education system, they become engineers or doctors or lawyers, like these high-end technical skill jobs, they, whether it's from China, India, parts of the Middle East, Africa, any of them, they come here and one of two things happen. They come here, they get a world-class education, they go back to their country and they try to make it a better place, or they stay here because they're like, the American dream lives here. I've now received a world-class education that I can try to make my name in this country. But like you said, we don't see people fleeing the US for all these other countries. As bad as some people thought it got when they're like, oh, I can't stand, who's elected, or I can't stand this and that, America's dead to me, I'm leaving this country. Almost no one actually did.
Yeah.
Like
what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? That's going to, like, you get a technical, if you get an education, you work in finance, engineering, any of these like big, who's paying you more? Where else are you going to get more for your talent?
Where are you going to get the freedom to start your own firm, like, and all these other things, and have an actual legitimate opportunity for growth the way that it is? And that's the thing. The American dream, the capitalist ideal, the systems we have in place, the basically the constitutional protections and the freedoms that we enjoy in this country don't exist in the same way in other countries. And people who are like, oh, this country sucks, everything's falling apart, we need a socialism or communism and that regime. Everybody's fleeing Venezuela and places like that for here. Nobody's going the other way. Like, nobody's like, where I want to move? From Miami to Venezuela.
No. And I mean, don't get me wrong, we do certain things in our systems already that are socialist in nature.
No offense to Venezuela, I'm sure parts are pretty, but it's just kind of
Venezuela is beautiful. It's just you can't live there. People are gold farming on RuneScape and making more money than doctors in that country. That's where they've gotten to right now.
But it's bad. I'm in the wrong profession. Yeah. I get hit way too much for a living.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a different story altogether. But yeah, I mean, just off of what we talked about in terms of whether or not we think the United States is going to fail, my understanding is no. And I'm not an expert. Like, I'm in the finance field, but I don't understand world politics, and I'm not an expert on everything that has to do with, the intricacies of whether or not a nation will stay or not. I don't think anybody can actually make that claim until it happens.
It's all just educated guesses from
It's all
different
educated
fields.
guesses.
Well, I guess I didn't weigh in fully on that. I'm in the same camp as Raj. I mean, I don't see the U.S. experiencing a decline and a crash to that level. We've seen recessions. We saw a Great Depression back in the 30s and 40s, going into that. The Russia, I think, is in a significantly steeper decline than we would be at this point. Even China's teetering on an edge more so than we are. As bad as things are getting for people with inflation and other things going on in the country, would we be a failed system? No, I don't think so. At this point, I see not that people aren't resilient in other countries like Russia, Siberia, all these parts, the tenacity and the ability to adapt and overcome has always been considered a uniquely American thing that people pride themselves on here in this country. Again, it's not to say other countries don't have that, but there's something special about the zeal of the American people to make it happen and overcome. I mean, a bunch of people who came over on boats and were living in colonies here in the U.S. decided, you know what? I want to practice my religion the way I want to. I'm tired of getting overtaxed by the world's greatest empire at the time. So he said, forget you, threw some tea bags in a puddle of water, and basically started sticking it to the man. So at that, like Raj said, that's the greatest social experiment was this country. Nothing has come close to achieving what has been done here. And for how young this country is, the level of progression that it has gone through in such a short amount of time and being a world leader to the level that it is. Do I see Russia failing by 2045 like we talked about? Maybe not. I don't really have any way to metric that out. My guess, best educated guess, is there's still a tenacity and a ferocity in the Russian people to adapt and overcome as well. I think you're going to see a lot of countries like that who are tired of the oppressiveness of the regimes they're under or the dictators or the leaders in those countries. You're going to see some people doing what the colonists did in America, basically saying, you know what, we're tired of it. We shouldn't be treated like this. There's a better quality of life out there that we deserve.
That's what I was going to bring up. So if a country as big as Russia does fail, right? And I mean, the logical thing would be like a bunch of microstates would pop up, and they would.
That's a possibility.
Basically say, well, we're maybe we relate more with Mongolia, right? So they'll join Mongolia.
Or see, maybe, like a fracturing of the country into the surrounding nationalities,
right? Or maybe Serbia would become its own, or sorry, not Serbia. Siberia would become its own,
kind of its own,
right? Serbia is its own.
Well, I don't know if the national government or the world will let that happen. I feel like the moment it gets to the point where Russia is in collapse, I think that the UN will start acting, because the point where people are going to be dying in the street because of bad decisions that their country has made.
Well, okay,
the world will step up.
The one thing they were told that they don't want it to happen, though, like all the Russian people have been told that anything like that is the biggest no-no.
It's the biggest no-no until their country can no longer provide for them, right?
Right.
Yeah. So when the country falls apart and there's anarchy in the streets, they'll take help from anybody. Like, Russian people aren't going to sit there stoic and be like, I'm just going to sit here and starve to death before the UN helps me.
Well, when the ruble basically, tanks, they go through a depression, healthcare is not available. It's,
Russia's been through enough famines. I don't think they're ready to sit through another one. They've had enough famines.
Yeah, I don't think we're quite at the hardness level of marching a bunch of troops across the winter, like to confront Germany, who was coming across thinking they could win.
No, it's not that point yet, but I think the biggest thing is they don't truly understand how crippled their economy is. Like, the entire time they continue this war, their economy is at a standstill.
Right.
And all they can do is either block the export of grain or try to sell their oil and that's all that's funding their government right now.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, perfect example here, like, people thinking like, oh, well, if something happened, one of the options is Putin will step down. I don't believe that for a second.
He's
the way
going to
that man's
disappear.
operated, he's either going to get disappear himself, or like, he's going to just try to stay in power and he's going to kill the next dude who's opposing him. I don't know.
Well, that's what he's done, though. He's collected his power for the past 20 years, just killing off anybody that could possibly oppose him.
Yep.
The people that are currently working right now are the ones that have proven that they'll never raise an arm to him. Really, the only people that have the true power to make this decision is now the oligarchs. So something recently happened. I don't know if you guys heard about it. A huge multinational bank called Credit Suisse failed. And Credit Suisse was caught helping a lot of these oligarchs move money when they weren't supposed to.
Ooh.
So their Credit Suisse is now gone. So they can't move their money anymore because no other bank is going to do it.
Dude, it's like when the government was saying that, let the American people go reinstate as privateers and go take oligarch ships out in the waters. And I'm like, oh man, government's green lighting going yo-hoing with the boys.
It's like, I don't think they can greenlight piracy, but it's interesting.
Privacy is a very derogatory word. We prefer to be called privateers.
Privateer citizens, yes. We're venture capitalists. That's what we are.
We're just capitalists of opportunity.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, yeah, I get it. I get the thought, Mike, but I mean, what's your opinion? Do you think this is going to fail?
I think, so here's what I think will happen before I die, which, if I'm
lucky, tomorrow? Like, do I just say it like that?
Hopefully that'll be 60 years, give or take.
Yeah, I was going to say, before the audience gets concerned, that's not exactly on the table for the next 10 years here.
But, so before I die, I think there's going to be a civil war in the U.S., and there's going to be some sort of a switch. Whether our government changes or not, I don't know.
You think there'll be a civil war in the U.S.?
I do, yes. And then also, before I die, I truly believe that maybe Russia won't be completely dissolved, but I could see the formation of microstates that either declare independence or join already established countries that maybe they're bordering or whatever.
Okay, hold on. I gotta go back to Civil War. Hold up.
We're not talking about the potential of the U.S. Civil War here, all right?
Dude, it's gonna be a quick Civil War. I'm just gonna throw it out there.
Wait, who is fighting who in the Civil War?
I honestly don't know. I don't know what it'll be.
Probably Green Bay fans versus the Eagles.
That's funny. No, I don't know who it'll be. I think it'll just be it'll be like our last Civil War, and it'll be based off belief systems, but obviously not slavery.
Come on, I guess somebody comes back. No. George Lee's back. He's back for slavery. Jim Crow laws.
Oh, dang.
And I don't know who would be right and who would be wrong either. I'm not saying I'm picking a side right now. I'm just saying I think before I die, there will be a civil war in the U.S. That's all I'm saying. And I think it'll be two sides. One thinks that they're right. The other thinks that they're right. And
that's typically how conflicts go.
Right. And I think the issue is going to be that you're going to see a lot of one of those sides in very powerful positions for many years. And the other side is going to get pissed off and say, I'm sick of it, and I feel like the system's rigged. And then they're going to go for it. And I don't know who's going to win. And I don't know how many people feel the same way for either side, right? But I just think it's going to happen.
I'm not all convinced on that. I'm not in the camp of Civil War. As much as I like to say, prepare for the coming boogaloo.
It's crazy, though, that you guys are like, oh, I doubt that'll ever happen, yet it's happened to every great anything.
I'm not saying it couldn't happen. It definitely could.
France.
I don't know that I'm convinced that it will, or maybe that's just
but like
optimism.
No, we are a truly democratic society now. Like a truly democratic, evolved society has not gone through. We're a level 1 civilization in the democracy scale. A level 1 democracy has not had more than one civil war. Usually, it takes one civil war to get them to the level 1 civilization, not civilization, democracy, to get them to the point where they have all the systems in place. But nobody's experienced 2 to like get to that point. Like, what do you how bad does it have to get? Like, what is going to be the dividing figure?
I guess this is where I'm switching back over camps a little bit. Not that I'm saying it'll happen or that I think it will, but where you're saying that we're a truly democratic society, that it won't happen, I don't buy that. I mean, people are so polarized and so much more divided than we ever have been. Well, at least that we have been in a long time in any recent history.
Mm-hmm.
There's just such a hyper polarization around mainly a couple key issues, but I mean, it just seems like everything nowadays, like it's not even having rational debates anymore. Some people are trying to keep that alive and bring that back, but it's like, oh, you don't believe what we do? I mean, clearly you're a terrorist. Or like, oh, you don't believe what we do? Well, you're a bigot.
So here's the issue with that, though. You're saying that there's a possibility of civil war, but it would require the states to be also involved in this.
Yeah, it would require money.
It would require states. It would require states to go into it.
We see a lot of states right now that are fighting everything the federal government is doing, dude.
That's fine. That's democratic. They can do that.
I know, but
they can do that.
What happens when you push too hard,
and
then all of a sudden you get pushback, and then just like in the Revolutionary War, all of a sudden there's a shot, and now we're at war. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, but aren't you noticing a cycle, though? Aren't you noticing the cycle? If we had a period of time where most of the legislation was democratic, and it was all in favor of democratic, now it's switched. The Supreme Court is more conservative. The bills and stuff that's being passed right now is more conservative. The power is shifted. Right. And it's a sway of power back and forth. Nobody holds the power for long periods of time. That's the beauty of the system. So you can have periods of time when one side. So how conservatives felt when the Democrats were in power and creating all this legislation is how the liberals feel when conservatives are in power.
Right. No,
and it cycles back and forth. It never gets to the point where it's just like if a Democratic or Republican Party holds the House or holds presidency for 10 to 20 years, then you're going to start seeing issues like this pop up. But that's never happened.
Right.
Ever.
Right.
In the history of the United States.
Now, I will say, just based on hot button issues nowadays, if there was going to be anything that was going to be a catalyst for any type of conflict in this country, whether it be a nationwide civil war or like a smaller scale conflict between a couple groups of people, to me, the most likely candidates are, one, it's going to be guns. Or two, it's going to be children in the education system.
So let's say it's firearms, okay? So we get a lot of stuff, and they one day say we're taking guns away from everybody, right? Which we've had this we've had this conversation. Now, that does not. Although yes, there is a line drawn in the sand between liberals and conservatives with firearms. There are people that fall on that independent side that may sway one or the other, but still have firearms. And so if somebody came down and said, we're getting rid of all of them, screw you guys, now you have this very interesting dynamic where it's not, and I never said liberals versus conservatives. I never said,
it really just falls
big cities versus rural towns.
No, it's pro-gun camp versus anti-gun.
Right. It could go that route. And those could be people that you would never even think would be whatever side you're on would be on your side, but they are, right?
But here's the issue. You're talking about in a situation where it's the people versus the government, not people versus each other.
I know. And that's kind of what I think it would be people versus government, Raj.
Yeah, but that's not a civil war. That's a revolution.
To be fair, no, it kind of is, because in the Civil War that we had, you had the South versus the North, the anti-slavery versus the abolitionists, and the main party in control of the federal government at that time was the Abolition Party. It was the Republican Party was
Right.
founded during the Civil War with Abe Lincoln.
So the South
So
created their own
really,
government.
it was the South versus the federal government. Even though we think of it as the South versus the North, it was the government of the nation separating.
So what the South? But in this situation, the South hasn't made a government. The South is just fighting the.
No. I'm saying like it is very much a people versus the government.
To me, a revolution is more
an overthrow of the existing government. That's a revolution, right? That's what every revolution's been so far, is the overthrow of the current system of power.
So the way I see it, with the differentiation between this being, if that were to happen, being a civil war versus a revolution, is a revolution is typically the central government against the entire nation, whereas the Civil War was a division of the nation, where you had a dividing line of this group said this, this group said another thing, although the federal government aligns with this group.
Right. But it doesn't mean we're trying to just straight up, because the South didn't necessarily want to overthrow the federal government. They just didn't want the federal government to impose the laws that they were stating.
Correct. And that's what the
rightfully so, the government should have imposed them, right? We're not defending slavery in any sense of the word.
Let's let the cat out of the bag. We're not pro-slavery. We're not any of that.
We are determining whether it would be a civil war or a revolution. I'm not saying our system is wrong, because we have a very good governmental system. I like it a lot, and everyone does, I think, or a majority of people do, and a lot of countries try to copy it. So I don't think it would be any kind of like go from democracy to tyranny or vis-a-vis or whatever. But what it would be is two groups of people, something happens, we'll say it's firearms, right? And half of them are like, no, we're allowed to have guns, and you are literally breaking the core of our foundation by saying we can't. The other one's saying, y'all are crazy and you're psychos, and so now we're going to grab guns to stop you from having guns.
Yeah, why do you need your AR-36?
Which will be hilarious to see. But I understand the need if that's the way it went. And so it would be, ideals, a war of ideals. But
this would literally, but there's no geological or state line that's going to divide these people, though, because we live in the
worst part.
Yeah,
we live in the Midwest.
Well,
we have people with guns, without guns, living right next to each other. No big deal.
Oh, that's what would be the craziest part about this, because one, you would have groups of people by state or even within states that are on the separate sides of that type of conflict, or you would have a mass geographic relocation of people, basically being like, oh, these like-minded people are grouping over here. Let's face it, they're all going to Florida, but but I mean, seriously, you would have people realizing that they're pocketed around the country, except for some states that are very much like pretty much a solid like one way, and you would have a mass migration of geographic relocation.
I mean the closest that we saw to this was January 6th, right? Where the capital of our democracy was actually broken into. And I understand these are citizens.
You mean when it was proven that the doors were open for them?
Whatever they decided to do. They still
I'm not
stormed.
Defending it. They shouldn't have went in there.
They went in there.
No, there's some people that definitely
the doors were open for them.
That's the thing. Like
the investigation showed a lot of stuff, and to me, if I was standing outside of the Senate building, right?
Yeah. Okay, so the doors were open for them. You have senators. You have sitting senators going up to the angry mob and raising their fist at them,
right?
Supporting them, being like, "Oh yeah, everything's fine. Come on in."
Right. So
like let's not just be like, all right.
It was a little bit blown out of proportion, although yes, an officer died.
Yes.
Right?
Civilians died.
And civilians died. That was not good.
No.
It was definitely mob mentality though, right?
Yeah.
And we saw a lot of that throughout that entire year prior to that.
Oh yeah.
And it was a culmination of all the riots. Right. All the side picking, all the Antifa versus this bullshit back and forth.
Well, yeah, the multiple metropolitan cities that were literally burned in large areas with billions of dollars in damage.
Absolutely.
Lost.
That's
none of it was right. None of it.
No, I'm
not advocating
January 6th, or it was Minneapolis, or
I'm not advocating for January 6th at all. Right. That's not what we're saying.
Because every like-minded American looked at that video and said, "Oh, that looks like treason."
Right.
That looks like something that's very wrong
Yeah.
in the system.
You
That
can't argue
moment
or- yeah.
embarrassed every United States citizen because they knew the world was watching.
Yep.
And as the world watched, the Capitol building was breached for the first time since the Civil War. And that was, I think, for me, the oh shit moment. That was the oh shit moment, me thinking, okay, there are people crazy enough to do this. I have to arm myself. And that's really when I started thinking about buying guns.
Well, and let's be real. I mean, just in the news in the past 2 months, have you seen all these people that have been getting shot
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
for no reason? Turning around in a driveway, shot. Knocked on the wrong door in the middle of the night because he.
Oh,
thought
that
he was
poor
their brothers.
kid. That poor
Shot.
kid got shot.
And I mean, this isn't based off of color either. I mean, it's black on white, it's white on black, it's black on black, it's white on white. It's insane, dude. It doesn't matter. People are either so terrified of what could happen to them because of the state that we're in right now, or they're so stupid that they're making dumbass decisions, right? That people are dying for literally no reason. And it's not even an argument, right? It's not even like, oh, I thought he was breaking into my house.
He was a 15-year-old child that knocked on your door to pick up his brother.
Yeah, because he thought that's where his brother was. And hell, dude, when we were in high school, someone would have opened the door and been like,
what are you doing here?
Well, and this, I think, to me, stems from the larger issue of the polarization, the hyper-vigilance, the hyper everything that people have been going through over the last couple of years. Compound all the issues that you want, from, you know, the riots to COVID to, you know, governmental issues to, you know, inflation, to everything going on. People are stressed, everything's going on, but the lack of rationality with some people that is just being lost and at an alarming rate, that they can't stop and think and rationalize through something for 5 minutes. That it's either I'm cool, everything's fine, life is good, to violence.
Right.
Like, well, that, I mean, we see that in the media and just in our social system as itself, right? Like, the whole idea of this podcast is to have civil conversation without turning it into a yelling match. And that doesn't happen in this world.
And I think we accomplished that quite well.
Yeah, I mean,
that's lost.
Even our presidential debates are turning into a debacle.
Yeah. Oh, it's a mess.
It's turning into just a yelling match at each other. Like, what is happening to our country?
Well, and the thing is, the immediate jump to violence or this hyper aggression, like people have lost their way in this world. Like, the moral decline, the moral comes when you get all these things going on, and you get people that are constantly short with people, treating people like garbage, like, you know, demeaning them. You know, everything is, you know, about internet views and likes and clout and all this other stuff going on. Like, there has got to be something in people's minds, if they're thinking about it rationally, that clicks and says there is a moral bankruptcy going on in this country, that people are losing their way from what we had. Like, I'm not saying that everything was perfect in history, but like our parents that were born in the 40s and 50s and 60s, like, they were going through this.
And it's because, like you were talking about, there's no struggle right now. I mean, I'm not saying that individual people don't have problems, because they do.
Well, they absolutely do, and they're valid problems.
But there's no widespread issue right now. We don't have half of our young men going to war overseas and dying, right? We aren't struggling for that much. We can literally get anything we want at any time. In the 60s, like what we were talking about, it was 60s and 70s, it was like amazing, right? Like,
oh yeah,
the US was pinnacle, but there was the overarching fear of Russia and a possible nuclear war, and so everyone's on edge. They're trying to be the perfect citizen because they don't want to be accused of being a spy, right?
Yep.
They want to make sure that they're ready if the war does happen. Then you move into the 80s and the 90s,
and they're like, no.
And although there's not many issues, everyone's striving for that next step up, right? You want the bigger boat, you want the bigger house. To get that, you got to work hard. You got to work
middle
harder.
Class shrinking and going into the upper middle class.
Exactly. So they were busting their asses. No one had to. No, they were struggling. They were working hard to get what they wanted. And now, today, I can get a guava any time of the year at my store. I can go onto Amazon and I can order the off-brand of any massage gun that I want, right? For half the price of the one that is manufactured here in the US. And although, yes, right now we're fighting inflation, and, that's hard on a lot of people, we can still get whatever the hell we want.
I'm curious about the guavas and massage guns, though.
Well, I'm just saying
together.
But I'm just saying
your Amazon cart must be crazy.
I want a half a guava and a massage gun, please.
They're like, oh god, this guy again.
Dude, Bezos is like, flag him now.
But all I'm saying is, you can get whatever you want, man. I mean, you really can.
In this country, yeah.
I will argue that point, though, because here's the difference in having the ability. Yes, we have access to a lot of different things nowadays. We can go on all these websites and get whatever we want. But the overall financial security of the individual in the United States is not good. It's not.
No, from individual.
For an individual to be able to, back in those times, in the 60s and 70s, a man could work a 40-hour job and feed himself, his wife, his 2 kids, and have a house and a car. That was the standard. Nowadays, on a 40-hour work week, on a standard salary, you can barely afford an apartment and a car. Not to mention the insurance that it costs. Not to mention the food. Not to mention, good luck if you have kids. Medical bills. It's just not possible. Working in the financial field, a staggering amount of people are now retiring and just going paycheck to paycheck. A staggering number of people in our age group cannot buy a house. It is impossible for them to buy a house. They will rent for the next 40 years because the housing prices are inflated, but their wages aren't inflated. So a lot of this social unrest that we have right now has, I believe, a lot to do with wages, has a lot to do with insecurities that people feel about their jobs, the money, and their financial situation. In the 60s and 70s, you could work a job, feed your family, do whatever you need to, plus save for your retirement, and you had a pension. We don't have pensions. They got rid of them. The biggest scam that was pulled on us was the removal of pensions for 401ks.
Right.
I can tell that wholeheartedly, working in finance. The biggest scam that was ever pulled on us was getting rid of pensions for 401ks and acting like that was better for us.
Thinking that was going to be a better option.
Yes.
So how do you fix that, Raj? I mean, so do you have to strengthen the dollar? Do you raise minimum wage?
Dollar is plenty strong. You need to raise minimum wage while also raising interest rates. So you want to increase the wage that people are making, but also make it more difficult to borrow, because we want people to have money without spending it frivolously.
So we're raising interest rates now, but we're not raising the wage. So what is the consequence of that?
The consequence is that now people are at a point where they're not making enough to pay for their bills, so they're having to borrow, but the cost of borrowing is so high now because interest rates are so high that they're putting themselves into a hole they can never dig out of.
So will we see a migration of upper middle class to lower middle class then?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
There's going to be a degradation of the upper middle class going, because there's going to be split into the upper middle class that got up and got into the higher class, and there's going to be a bunch of them that go down to the middle class level, which is going to be because either rates are so high that their businesses couldn't survive. Rates are so high that all these flexible rate mortgages are coming due and they can't afford it. They're losing houses. Right now, if you do a mortgage right now, 2 years ago, I could get you a 30-year mortgage at 3.25%. 3.25%, phenomenal rate. Right now, you'd be lucky to get 6 to 7%.
So I will pose this question to you then. You know that there's people out there that are way smarter than you, Raj, that know the same damn thing, right? So what would be the benefit of a government forcing people from upper middle class to lower middle class or even poverty line?
Why would they do that?
Yeah, well, they know they need to raise the minimum wage with interest rates.
Mm-hmm.
So why would they do that?
Because the raising the minimum wage requires the parties to be in line with doing so, and it'll never pass the party level. It'll never pass the Republican idea that, oh, things are just as good as they used to be. There's no need to raise the minimum wage. A person working at McDonald's doesn't deserve $15 an hour. How about you work at McDonald's for a day and let me know how much you think you deserve to get paid for dealing with the bullshit that you have to do, right?
I guess what I'm getting at, and maybe we should be more in a conspiracy theory for this one. So
I was gonna say, I feel like we just dip right out of Russia.
So we'll circle back to it in a second. But if you're forcing people from upper middle class to middle class and middle class to lower class and lower class to poverty, what you're doing is you're mass forcing the populace to rely on you to provide for them as a government, because you have to. Now they need food stamps. Now they need whatever, right? And the ultimate form of power for a government is a populace that is dependent on them.
Yeah, it's
so to me, and this does not follow any party line. This is just the government in general. Like you said, the parties will never agree. Well, they could just play that off because they know that if they can force people to be dependent on them, then they have control.
But here's the issue with that, though. The party that is trying to cut all these government benefits is the Republican Party.
Right.
They want lower government benefits used. They want lower uses of, tax dollars going to these kind of socialist. I say that with quote unquote things that need to be in place, like welfare and
healthcare.
Social healthcare, Medicare, Social Security, which are socialist principled ideas. It's
there's social programs.
Yeah, there's social programs that are built around the idea of socialism, where everyone chips in and it gets paid out for everybody else. But it's just that idea that I believe a lot of the unrest in this country has to do, especially with the youth, has to do with the fact that you can work 40 to 50 to 60-hour work weeks and still not be able to afford a house or some kind of security, or just not be going paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
And that's a killer.
And I guess where I fall on this, so there's definitely a lot of truth to that, of like with the inflation of prices and housing market and everything else like that, it's not a one-to-one comparison of like back with what people were earning when our parents bought houses compared to what we're earning with all that and buying a house and all. It's not the same. It doesn't equate the same way. So things have definitely gotten harder. I mean, as time has gone on for a generation. I mean, the old adage has been said by a bunch of people. I don't know who to quote it from directly, but the old adage of, hard times create, strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. It's a cycle that repeats itself. Because that's just the nature of it. When you get comfortable, you're not as, hardened as like some of our relatives or like grandparents, back when they were dealing with coming off a depression and a world war. Vietnam. Like, so they, the hard times created a lot of strong men that basically were like hit the nose of the grindstone and, make it happen. Now, there's a lot of complex issues that I'm not going to take time to break down all of them because I got opinions on a lot of them. One, do we overuse social programs in this country? I think so. I think there's an over-reliance on it to a point. I'm not saying people don't deserve to have them. I'm not saying that some people don't need them, but there's an over-reliance.
There's not enough oversight on these social programs, and I see it on a day-to-day basis. People coming in and collecting social programs, walking out to the parking lot and driving away in their BMers and Audis. Right. And I see that on a day-to-day basis.
So the other thing is too, I mean, the old statistic, I don't know how old they are, but the statistics of, the biggest factors to ensure that you're not going to be below the poverty line, because there actually is still a wage mobility in the country that you have the ability to get into the top, into the 10% or the 1% below it. Some people at different points of their life, they earn good money, they earn bad money. It just depends, obviously, on a lot of different factors, but...
I mean, so here's the thing: good money and bad money is all set, but like, no matter what job you work, if you work 40 hours a week, you should be able to afford rent.
Oh yeah.
That's a basic principle, right? And a lot of these people working fast food, working 50 hours, can't afford rent.
Well, and
I
that's
mean, the idea of the mobility, yes, you can get, oh, if you don't like working at McDonald's, go work somewhere else. Well, guess what? Somebody's got to work McDonald's.
right.
True.
And that person has to survive. So it's not just like, oh, if you don't like McDonald's, go, okay, so then McDonald's fails because it can't hire anybody because everyone decides to go work for the next competitor to make a little bit of money.
Naturally, I mean, there's going to be part of that, and then
Mhm.
obviously, like, what's the minimum wage there? You know, what's the rent rates going? Like, what's happening there with inflation and with property values? So
And fucking God bless student loans.
Well, and here's the thing, to me, and this doesn't apply to everybody. I'm not making a blanket statement for everybody in our age group or just that's out there. Clearly, there's a lot of different experiences with what people are dealing with. The two of the biggest factors of not being below the poverty line are graduating high school and not having kids out of wedlock. I'm not making a judgment on anybody for any of those things, but those are two. There's a third one. I always forget what it is, but those are two of the big factors that are strong indicators of if you are going to live within the poverty means. If you violate those tenets, basically, you know, but that's not the end all be all. I think part of the issue is too, with what I kind of mentioned earlier, with our society being so materialistic, so inward focused, of like chasing that click or that clout. Like, there are young people that either are having a hard time with rent or can't afford a house and all that because the instant gratification that our generation experiences is unreal. Like, this person talks about, like, I'm on, you know, food stamps, for example, or, oh, I'm having trouble making rent, you know, with the way I'm working and stuff, I'm not working enough hours. And yet they've got a $400+ a month car payment. They've got a brand new iPhone that they just went and purchased. You know, they're constantly going out to restaurants and stuff. They're going and spending money on entertainment. I'm not saying that's everybody, obviously, but there is definitely a component to this instant gratification lifestyle of people thinking that I deserve to have the life that my parents have, or that somebody else I know who has worked for decades to live that lifestyle. They're like, I deserve to have that now. I haven't paid my dues basically to basically live a lower means. I mean, the biggest thing is if you're living above your means, you need to. There's always an area that you can trim back. I'm
But
not
what are
saying
these
that's
dues,
true for
though?
everybody.
What are these dues? We're a society where our wealth has built on top of the wealth our ancestors left for us. So every generation should have a better life than the previous generation had. That's the whole point of a society. But if we get to the point where if your dad worked 40 hours a week and he could afford to have a house, have a car, and go out on vacation, take you and your kids to vacation, but you're now 40 years old, you work the same amount of job, you might have worked the same job that your dad did, but now you can't even afford to keep a roof over your kid's house. That's not the same, though. That's not frivolous. There's plenty of people that frivolously spend. That's not an issue. Like, we all know that that's true, but I'm talking about the situation where nobody that frivolously spends is out there protesting, thinking that they deserve more than it's the people that are working hard jobs. I mean, people that are working jobs what nobody else wants to work. Sanitation workers,
right?
Are people that work on our ambulances that are barely scratching by. Like,
EMS, especially in the first responder community, they get paid very poorly. I can attest to that. However, I will say that paramedics and EMS are some of the worst paid in first responders.
Absolutely. They are literally the worst, but they're the most important. When you are dying, they are the most important. The police don't matter, the fire doesn't matter. They are the ones that are most important, and they get paid nothing.
Yeah, I mean, it's so the thing is, like, the other ones have their place. Like, I'm not saying that they're not important. I know you're not either, but it's like when you're having a medical emergency, it could be a life or death scenario. The guy that paid $8,000+ to go to paramedic school, who has the know-how and the education, the certification to give you the necessary medications to intubate you and put you to sleep and go night-night so you can wake up in a hospital bed instead of in the other world, then, you know, he's getting paid $15 on an ambulance an hour.
Yeah. And he's working 24-hour shifts, bro.
Yeah, he's working a 24-hour block, and the kid at McDonald's just flipped a patty for 50 cents. You know, and he's gonna make $16 over the next hour.
That's not a problem. If the minimum wage is not just going to affect McDonald's workers. It should
I'm
affect everybody.
I'm not saying
yeah.
it's just McDonald's. That was
Mhm.
just an example.
Yeah.
But obviously, to me, also, so it's separate from the minimum wage part of it too. I don't think that somebody who goes into, like, say it's like a fast food or a service industry,
Mhm.
say that's the job that you get. I don't think that there should be a realistic expectation that you are going to make the same amount as a skilled labor job.
Unless
They
you
should
move
be
up in
paid
that company.
higher, unless you move
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
Obviously,
they
you
don't
go to
even need
school,
to.
you get
yeah.
you get all this other stuff. You get into a GM position, assistant
Mhm.
manager, regional. You can go up in the positions. Obviously,
Yeah.
obviously,
And
one of
nobody's
the other
saying that.
things.
Nobody's saying that they should be paid as much as doctors or skilled professionals or engineers, but it's
it's
about being able to survive, right? Can you survive? A lot of these people that get these jobs are just getting them so that way they can survive for a time period. Nobody's trying to make McDonald's their career.
Right.
They're doing it so
Right.
that way they can
Yeah,
survive
nobody
and feed
goes
their
into that.
kids. Yeah.
I should say almost no one goes there probably thinking this is my end goal,
Yeah.
unless they want to move up in like corporate.
And I mean, we saw firsthand that when people started saying, no, I'm not working for $9.95 an hour, these companies started paying up.
Yep.
Well, and here's what I also think falls into this, and this is part of a topic for a whole other podcast. To me, our generation was sold probably, in my opinion, one of the biggest rackets, which is the idea that college is the only way you're going to make it in life.
Yep.
Mhm.
With the increasing student debt, with the price that these colleges and universities are charging for admission, which is astronomical. I'm not even going to get on that soapbox because I'll never get off. The fact that trades were undervalued or not even mentioned, that, the alternatives, because college is not for everybody, or the idea that no advisor told this person that if you go and get a 4-year degree in psychology, you're not going to be making $100,000 like the doctorate level psychologist who owns his own practice. You're not going to be making the upper mid to even the top end. Like, you're not going to go get a 4-year liberal arts degree typically and be making, upper 5 to 6 figures.
I can honestly say that when I was in high school and when I was even in college, and I thought, when I graduate, I'm going to have a job where I'm making $50,000 plus. And it wasn't until later in college, probably 2 years in, that it hit me hard. And I'm like, I'm not going to be making $50,000 plus coming out of college.
Not
to start. And if I had, in the same amount of time, gone to a welding school
and
got a good job with a reputable welder in the area,
and you got your journeyman and everything,
and I got my journeyman,
$100+ an hour.
Oh yeah, I'd be making 75,000 plus today, maybe more.
Oh yeah.
If you learned how to be an HVAC technician, if you learned how to be a plumber,
yep,
75 to 100 an hour.
I will honestly say, though, plumber,
once you get,
I give them props. I couldn't do that job.
No, there's so much like garbage and shit that you get from that now.
And if you become a master in your trade, you can do it for yourself and work it on the side. Your billing rate is fantastic.
Had to call a master plumber for where I work. Our fire system broke. The only person that can touch it is a master plumber. We had to get a special master plumber out there
because of the fire suppression system.
Because no one keeps a master plumber on call because of their price.
Mm-hmm.
How much do you think it cost?
Oh, for an emergency?
10 grand probably.
It was an emergency. He wasn't in our network or in the fire company's network.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't do that much, I'm going to be honest with you.
I'll bet you his billing rate was still at least $150 an hour at least.
It's a big company. He'll probably have charged like thousands.
$15,000.
Yep.
Total for the whole job.
For the whole job.
Well, you got to think about it because it's all the lines.
2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
He opened up 2 U-joint pipes. They were big, but he opened them up. He cleaned them out. He flipped the seals and he put them back. And he pulled something out. That's what had messed it up. He pulled a piece of plastic out, put it back together, and he made in 2 hours. Because he didn't work for a company. He was his own person, independent. He made $15,000.
Yeah.
Dude, 15K. That boy's going on vacation, man.
And dude, you know you're not the only company paying him.
No.
And I mean, to become a master, I mean, you have to have years in the profession. You have to know
Right.
what the fuck you're doing. Like, it's not easy to do, but the issue is, like, he's a skilled individual, but nobody comes to our high school and tells us, hey, by the way, have you heard that you could make almost $100,000 being an HVAC guy 5 years after you're done with school?
Right.
Hey.
And hell, even especially in our high school, Raj, and a lot of high schools nowadays, you could start trade school early.
Mm-hmm.
You can walk out being an apprentice or even a journeyman in some high schools. You can start sophomore or junior year.
Yeah. You can learn how to weld in a lot of high schools. They'll teach you.
I mean,
metalwork and shop. Like,
frustrating. So frustrating to me. Anyways, let's look back to Ukraine.
Yes, so for those of you listening, this was technically supposed to be about Ukraine, but I think we've gotten into the idea of society in general, and I think that's really been our focus.
Call it societal conflict.
Societal conflicts, yeah. And I mean, we'll do a full episode on Ukraine and going into the actual detail, but I think this is what we decided to go with today.
So let's talk about this then. So Ukraine, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember if we established this. I mean, I think we did. You were playing devil's advocate, Raj, but do they have a right to defend themselves?
To defend themselves? Absolutely.
Okay. And with everything that we've been seeing with what the Ukraine is doing to these Russian soldiers, which is borderline war crimes. But
are you talking about dropping bombs into trenches or booby trapping bodies?
Booby trapping bodies, things like that. But we also know that there have been genocides on
Russian side.
Yeah, this side of the map. I can't bring my finger into focus. right in here.
Yes.
There's been some pretty nasty genocides. So, if you had to leave your grandma in Luhansk, right?
Yeah.
Probably one of the first villages, towns that was taken. And she's not going to leave, right? That's her home. She's lived there her entire life. She lived there before it was Ukraine. So she stays. And you've been gone for months, and you get word back that she died because maybe they shelled the heck out of the town, or worst case scenario, maybe they were pulling people out of their houses and they were just killing people that they didn't want to support or whatever. And, I can almost feel sympathy and understand why you would be dropping mortars from drones or doing questionable things. But we also know that a lot of those Russian soldiers do not want to fight. Lots of drone footage has surfaced of like Russian troops en masse just walking back to Russia, dude.
No.
Like they got a pack on their back and they're just walking home. They're like, forget it, waving at the drone, like, hey, see you guys, good luck. Like,
nobody actually wants to be there other than the Wagner group.
True.
The Wagner group is the only group of people that actually want to be in this war.
You better explain what that is to people that don't know, though.
So the Wagner group are a bunch of mercenaries. It's a mercenary. Imagine Blackwater for Russia.
Okay, you do know where he's getting them from, though, right?
From prisons
and mental institutions.
Yep. So the Wagner group is got a bunch of highly trained Spetsnaz people, but then they're recruiting from jails where people are murderers, rapists. So a lot of these like rape allegations and all these things that are happening is because of, first, due to the alcoholism that's rampant, because a bunch of these kids are now being sent to war. They're getting just blitzed out of their mind because, I mean, at this point they think they're going to die. They don't care. So they're just raping and pillaging and doing whatever they want. So then, two, you have Wagner Group, which is basically a bunch of mercenaries who've got the license to do whatever they want. And there's a little bit of tension now because the guy who leads the Wagner Group is now vying for power against Putin. So he's really the next, if Putin gets offed, he's the next one in line to take the throne. And that's a terrifying thought because this guy is actually might be worse than Putin. Because this guy is just openly crazy and he doesn't care.
So I've been watching some videos too, and they've been finding pill bottles and like sacks, like little baggies would be
Mhm.
with pills in it, and I guess it's like a methamphetamine substitute as well.
Oh, so they're
So
doing the Hitler
they're doing
technique.
the Hitler
Okay.
thing too. So
Yeah.
they are giving their troops drugs.
Speed. Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. It's
Just getting them
synthetic.
hopped
Is
up.
from what I heard. It's not actual meth or anything like it was back in.
Wasn't Hitler the one that did put it in chocolates? They
Yep.
put it in chocolates and put
Yep.
that and gave it to his soldiers. Yeah.
So he's doing that to his troops, and I'm gonna be honest with you. I just don't think there's enough patriotism in them to forward that. So the Germans, it worked really well. Their Blitzkrieg, right? Because
Yeah.
they were giving them meth. They were all patriotic. They felt like they all felt like they had been wronged.
Mhm.
They got behind their leader hardcore, and they wanted to fight. So
Yeah.
they're like, hell yeah! And now I feel like I'm a superhuman, so
Mhm.
I'm really gonna fight. But you get people like you were talking about that already have mental issues, right? Prisoners, everything like that. You get the standard regular troops who probably don't want to fight at all, and they were literally told fight or I'm going to kill your mom when they
Mhm.
came to the door, right? So you give these kids drugs and booze, yeah, you start seeing some crazy stuff because it's going to make them do things that you don't want them to do.
I mean, we're looking at the war right now. The major thing that's going on right now with the war is Bakhmut, right? So you see the desperation in Russia right now that they're fighting over a coal town, a town that has no strategic value, but they're sending wave after wave of people just so they can claim a victory. Because they got their asses kicked all the way down to the river before winter set in. Because for those of you that are listening that haven't kept up, winter is just dissipating in Ukraine-Russian war. It's been so the war's been on hiatus since the winter set in because it's almost impossible. Good luck fighting a war in winter, especially a trench-style war. So now it's just a fight in Bakhmut, and everywhere else they're just getting ready. So Bakhmut is an area that has no strategic value to Russia, but Russia is going after it, bombing it to hell, sending its people in to die just because they want to claim moral victory in an area. And that's what's happening. But if you look at that, that's just an act of a desperate person. That's an act of desperation where you're just trying to cling to some kind of victory because you know that once winter is done, once the snow is thawed, the full force of the Ukrainian army, backed with all the training that they've had, because this whole time they've been sending people to UN areas to train. People have been training. They've been training on weapon systems that they haven't even deployed yet. All the HIMARS are ready to go again. All these advanced the tanks are being prepared. All the tank crews have been prepared. So now you're going to have a full-on assault. Russia will not last another summer. I'm confident in saying this is Russia's last summer in Ukraine. By the end of this summer, going into winter next year, Russia will be beaten back. Crimea will be retaken. And they might hold a couple hundred square foot of territory just because they'll just have the manpower to. Crimea is falling. Ukraine is no longer stopping at the border. Ukraine is taking Crimea back.
Absolutely.
And that's just what's going to happen. Absolutely.
Russia took the first step. We just let them, we appeased them the first time. And, you know, I have a huge issue when I first heard, when this whole Crimea thing was happening in 2012.
Yeah.
You know, I was upset because we have this saying that history repeats itself, right? And what was the first thing we did with Hitler? He said, I want this. And we said, okay. I want this. Okay. Well, maybe if we just let him have it, he won't do anything. Oh, that worked out real well, didn't it?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, Putin starts demanding stuff, and we're like, okay. And it's like, dude, come on. Like, you know what's going to happen. And here it is right here. If it isn't the consequences of my own actions.
Yeah.
So he takes that first step. And he basically says, screw you guys.
Dude, have you looked at the truly, like, Russia's tank situation is so horrible that they're starting to bring World War II tanks out. Yep. So Russia did this whole thing about her T-41 Armada, like the super high tech, never been seen in battlefield.
Right.
Never once stepped foot. They said, "Oh, it was in Syria." Nobody's ever seen pictures of that thing. They don't have any functioning. They created a tank. Did you know that they used the engine from the Panzer? The Panzer tank, the most unreliable tank in World War II. They decided to use its engine. This thing got stuck in the parade.
Yep.
And had to be towed by another tank out. So that's what they have right now. They have 36 Leopard tanks coming, another 30 Abrams tanks coming. And these are tanks. These are tanks with night vision, auto stabilizing turrets, so they can fire going 40 miles an hour.
Yep.
And they can fire and hit a target from 2 miles away. Like they're done.
Did I only say what I said not on stream about the tanks in the on the street? I don't
Oh
remember.
no, you talked about it on the stream, yeah.
Yeah, how they have them lined up.
They have them
I
lined
did?
up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're so bad in terms of like getting their infrastructure because Russia still relies heavily on rails, on trains.
Yep.
If they get one hit on one of those train systems, it's over.
It's over.
It's over.
Dude, they got farmers out there, the Ukrainians, right?
Mhm.
On the front line. They've given farmers anti-missile interceptors, basically. Like they're basically javelins, right?
Mm-hmm.
I watched a TikTok of a farmer, not a military guy, a farmer, see a missile get launched, and he went into his house, walked out, uncapped it, lined it up. You could hear the beeping, beep, 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 beep.
The laser lock and is gone.
And it shoots out, and it takes about 20 seconds. And all of a sudden, boom, big old explosion in the sky. I'm like, dude, this farmer just totally screwed a missile strike.
Yeah.
Farmers, I love it. It's the greatest thing.
So this is the problem that happens. Like,
Peak
so the
24.
first time we did this, I had to be the devil's advocate, but like for Russia, and that was my job in that episode. But it's not like I get
Russian
to
sympathizer.
Yeah, I get to have fun now and talk about some of the stupid stuff that's happening. Like, Russia is so dumb with how they handled, like, there was so much corruption happening, is that they had all these tanks listed that they had. You know, Russia was like they had the largest tank fleet in the world. Half those tanks don't work because the people that run these yards scrapped them.
Yep.
Or sold them for profit. And they would just mark them off as, yep, they're still here, but you'd have all these empty shells with no engines in them. And you'd be like, okay. So, like, it's so corrupt and so bad. Like, this whole war was just supposed to be a show of power, but all it showed is that I doubt they'd be able to invade Pakistan. That's how little I think about the Russian army right now.
And that is saying something.
Like, I don't think they have any capabilities to invade any country, because when you invade a country, you not only deal with the military, you have to deal with the people.
So
well, like you said, there's no patriotism. They don't even have their own people sold on it.
Oh yeah, even the people that are probably working in the factories making this stuff, they're probably going half the speed that they can.
Dude, they're buying weapons from Iran.
Yeah.
Because they can't keep up with this shit. They ran out of artillery missiles. They had to buy from Iran.
So you heard about the revolutions that are happening in Pakistan, or is it Iran? Which one is it?
Iran is having the revolution right now because of the girl that died.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And the protesters are attacking the like government buildings now, you know?
Yeah. It's a full-blown insurrection there right now.
It is. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And
good for them.
I know. And it's scary because think about Russia. So not only are you actually fighting a physical war, Iran is one of their biggest
supporters.
Yeah. So now you're like, I need money to help you.
And the funny part is
your guns.
And the funny part is China cannot afford to help because
Nope.
China needs everything in case they decide to go after Taiwan.
Yep.
Oh, 100%. They're stockpiling because they're like, I'd love to help my guy.
And guess what?
I got my own problems.
America doesn't need its tanks to fight China. It doesn't. So you can send all the tanks it wants over to the other side and you'll be just fine because there's no naval ships going to the Black Sea. to fight this fight. So
we've got corn-fed, homegrown boys in the freaking sticks that could buy a drone off of Amazon or rig that thing up to be one of the deadliest devices the military's ever seen.
bro, they will train gators to become the most deadly creatures.
And that's the thing. That's just the ingenuity of war, my dude. Like, and the military be like, "This is great. We need this." And this guy's like, "That was only."
You know what?
third
The whole
bush light."
idea of a bomb on a drone is something that I thought of in like middle school. Like you think of like it's stupid stuff that you think about as a kid. You'd be like, "Oh, I get a drone. I can drop stuff on people." But like they're doing this in real
Here
life.
we are.
They're doing this in real life.
And
Like,
it's
oh my God.
extremely effective.
Very.
Which is the best part.
Can you imagine hearing the sound of a drone and just feeling terror? Not even a big drone.
Their operators, the people that are doing that the most, are getting so accurate that if there's a tank with its hatch open, they can drop it in the hatch.
Oh yeah.
That's not very big, dude. That's probably like 2.5 by 2.5 feet.
Yeah.
That's because these dudes are basically playing Modern Warfare Prestige at this point.
Yes. They prestiged multiple times.
Rounds inside of open hatch tank.
They've replayed this level so many times that they're
oh my God. Have you seen the mortar rounds surrounded by German stick grenades?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
They're wrapping them in the stick grenade, so it not only does it create more explosion, but the stick grenades itself turns into more shrapnel, and it just blows up everything.
So here's the other thing. So Russia is so low on ammo right now. Well, they're not low on ammo, but they're low on like higher, like larger sized ammo. So like 50 BMG, whatever the heck, probably 127 millimeter like BTR rounds, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They're so low on it that they've told other people, like, make sure your shots count, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you look on TikTok, you can find people that are engaging BTRs, like, and these are just standard ground troops, right? With RPGs. They're engaging BTRs, and the BTR isn't even shooting at them because either it doesn't have the ammo or they're so worried that they're going to shoot and waste all their ammo that they want to be sure of their target. By the time they are sure, they've gotten hit by 2 RPGs and they're basically out of commission.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's why, like, I mean, this goes back to the whole thing at the beginning. Like, throughout the Cold War and, like, everything, like, everybody said don't poke Russia. Like, they're such a big, dangerous powerhouse. I've got to say, I'm not impressed.
Yeah, no, it's all bravado. It was all bravado, basically. They're just trying to get themselves, puffing their chest up to make themselves look bigger.
Their
like
leader
the
rides bears with
chocolates.
his shirt off.
Mm-hmm.
They're like a coconut-filled chocolate. You're like, wow, this looks really good on the outside. Take a bite, and you're like, what the...
Okay, first of all...
fuck you. I love coconut chocolate.
First of all, I love those. Thank you.
Oh, you guys are animals.
Fucking almond joy and mounds are my favorite.
Oh,
candies.
that's my
fuck
stuff
you.
right there.
Oh, well, you guys can have all of them.
I will eat all of that shit.
I do.
Eat your goddamn Snickers, you angry boy.
Yeah. People are like, oh, I don't like these almond joys. And I'm like, you want my disappointing, like, 1/3 of a crappy Twizzler?
Yeah, have my fucking Babe
wrapping.
Have my Babe Ruth, you fuck.
Okay, first of all, Babe Ruths are great, too.
You guys would be the best to have. We should go trick-or-treating when you're together.
Dude, you can have that sad
grown-ass man.
You can have that sad little Twizzler in the individual wrapping.
Trick or treat. We just get fucking Nick in a gimp mask and
put a leash on.
Trick or treat. Just wait for reactions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our plan is complete. All of the almond joys belong to me.
Pat his head every time. Good job, Nick.
Good boy.
So someone gives you an apple or like a bag full of candy corn.
He's gonna carry an apple in his mouth.
Just to whip that candy corn back at him.
If they give him an apple, right? They give him an apple. I already have the comeback for it. Oh, perfect. We were gonna spit roast him tonight, anyways.
Oh,
and just watch the reaction. I just want the reaction. Like, we're definitely getting shot, but I just want the reaction.
Now, remember how we were talking about earlier how people will just knock on a random door and just get shot or turn around in the driveway? I feel like this is starting to turn out to be a really bad plan.
This is a very bad idea, but I can't. I love it. I
Go
love
the
it
night
so much.
before. Is this the right night?
Trick or treat.
What would you do for a Klondike bar? Well, let me tell you what I do for an almond joy.
Anyways, so yes, Ukraine has the right to defend themselves. Russia's very weak, weaker than we thought. What's some of the most interesting things you guys have seen so far, considering this? I don't know what I would call it. I guess counterattack by the Ukraine that's going on in the past couple, like 2 or 3 weeks.
It's been kind of back and forth. It's just interesting to see how it's kind of trying to guess where the main front of the force is going to be. Are they going to take the north, or are they going to go straight south?
I'd go straight south.
Yeah, because they got to make a decision. Because if they can take straight south, they can cut off the access to the Black Sea through Crimea. But it's going to be a tough ask because you are invading a peninsula,
right?
And you're going to be you're fighting entrenched people in a situation there. But yeah, I mean, my honestly, the most interesting thing that I'm looking forward to see is how these like newly trained Ukrainians in modern tanks just obliterate these Russians with their antiquated weaponry.
Dude, we're gonna have so many tank aces coming out of Ukraine after this.
Honestly,
we'll probably just recruit them if there's ever.
How many tanks do you think we'll get back from the war? Like, we sent 30 Abrams and 30 Leopards. How many are we getting back? Like
28 Abrams and 29 Leopards.
That's the thing, man. At the beginning of the war, it was all about the ghost of Kiev. Now it's about the Badger of Bakhmut.
And one of them's going to be
the
because
Badger.
they didn't change the oil in it.
Yeah, they're like, oh, we forgot oil change.
Dang it!
Dimitri, no.
So what I'm curious to see is now with all of this supposed like ground that they've gained in Bakhmut, what is it, like 2 miles?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 2 kilometers. Sorry, I'm using the American system. But no, so with that supposed like 1.2 miles that they've gained ground in Bakhmut, they've had reports that Ukrainian forces are preparing major counteroffensives. And I'm curious to see how that's going to pan out.
So
I mean, they're looking at like weapons depots, command centers, armor, artillery. Like they're just being like, I think at first Zelensky was like, no, we're not quite ready for a counteroffensive yet. And now they're like, well, we're kind of prepping for it.
So Bakhmut is just a meat grinder. It's all the Ukrainians are using it for. They're literally taking it and they're retreating so that way Russians will come back in. Then they'll just attack them,
do the same
put them through the grinder again, and then they'll go back and they'll come back and put them with the meat grinder. It's basically depleting the forces. Russians have lost so many lives and so many of their resources trying to take this useless town that serves no purpose.
It's kind of like dip netting.
What?
just waiting for them to swim up in and then just cast that net upon the water.
Honestly, they'll probably just keep these guys thinking that there's going to be a full frontal offensive in this area in Bakhmut.
Oh yeah,
and they're just going to go for a southern attack.
And
they're just going to go straight for Crimea.
Well,
because if that's all they need. They take Crimea. Russia has no chance of winning this war. It's over.
Yeah, no,
because they blockade that road.
Already, I don't see Russia having a great chance at this point.
No, because Russia, what they're hoping for, the Russian strategy is to hold out to the point where the Ukrainians will say it's no longer worth the fight. And then they get to keep the land, and they said, oh, we won the war. We got this land. That's what Russians are hoping for. Ukraine is saying, we are no longer going to appease you by letting you take land.
Yep.
We will fight you till the bitter end until we get all of the land back. So it's basically like an unstoppable force meets an immovable object where Russia will continue to send troops to an area just to show force. But eventually somebody's going to have to go in and say, hey, you're sending our kids to the meat grinder.
Yeah.
You're going to have to change your policy.
I watched a trench clearing of a Ukrainian soldier.
Mm-hmm.
You got 5 Russian soldiers. They never shot a shot back at him. They don't even know what the hell they're doing.
No.
Oh my gosh.
And he shot. So imagine, like, if you're sitting in a trench, right? And you hear a gunshot right there next to you, you're going to get ready.
Yeah.
And he's he demolished one guy, 5
Can't
Russian
be slow.
soldiers.
You just got to flick on those boys.
So the Russian troops just don't even know what they're doing.
The Russians don't know where the rest of the Russians are.
Yeah.
That's the issue. There's no communications. All the main guys are dead.
Everybody expected this was going to be all these Russian soldiers of the caliber of like Spetsnaz in a juggernaut suit, like running around the Ukraine, just demolishing the area. It's guys that aren't even doing the basics.
No, they sent these people in. The entire world gave Ukraine 2 weeks to survive. 2 weeks is what the census was.
They're like, oh, they're gonna wipe Ukraine off the map.
And I mean, to be fair, it got real close to 2 weeks. But what happened is they held off the invasion on Kiev.
Yep, that's
and once that invasion of Kiev was turned back, it was over.
Yep,
it was no longer going to be a fast war.
At that point, they were like, "Oh God, that didn't work."
I mean, like, and why haven't we put sanctions on Belarus? Because they're clearly helping the Russians. So why are we not throwing sanctions on their government?
It might just have to be. It might be one of those things where you just have to prove it enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if
basically,
if you hide it in paperwork, you can't go to NATO and say we're doing it because of this.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, unless you've got the real concrete backing for it, then it just looks like we're messing around with that.
Yeah, I know that Finland is just licking its lips, waiting for a bomb to drop on their country because there's like about 45 Apache helicopters parked there.
Well, they just joined NATO, right? They just got approved. Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
And so it's just how many other countries? 7, 6.
Oh yeah, a lot of it's the opposite effect of what they thought was going to happen. A bunch of these countries joined NATO. They're like, okay, thank you.
I mean, I know personally with the whole conflict, I'd like to see at least our priorities be a little more domestically focused, at least with some of the spending. But
and I understand that because it's like, all right, we have so many problems of our own, but it's just like this is a proxy war that's got to end at some point, right? Because we've been at a proxy war with Russia for well over almost 80 years now.
Yeah.
And we've been fighting this war since World War II ended.
It hasn't ended. Like, but I mean, like when you look at the aid that the U.S. has given to Ukraine over this conflict, the largest donors of military aid to Ukraine from January 2022 to February of this year, the U.S. has donated $46.65 billion.
So here's the problem with the fact that we give that number to them. People act like we just printed $46 billion and gave it to Ukraine. We just pulled it from our stockpile.
Correct.
This is already stuff that we had and we were just sitting on.
Yeah.
This is not new money printed. This is not affecting our economy. If not, it's boosting our economy because we're getting this and it's going to end up being money that Ukraine's going to pay us back in later day. Because they're not getting this shit for free.
No, but I do understand the gripes of with people starting to face, rising inflation and other things going on in the country, yada, yada. Whether it's the ultimate solution or not, they're like, I think it's been a sentiment in the country for a while that it's like, why are we like focused on our foreign aid so much and sending all this money that way when we've got so many domestic issues that we could be solving? I mean,
if that's the case, why aren't these people also getting mad at the amount of money that we spend on our military? Because it's the same issue.
Yeah, right. You're right.
So like this, it's an uneducated assumption on things that they don't understand. Like, this is not an aid that in case of we're not taking money away from your tax dollars that you've given this year and given them directly to Ukraine. That's not how this works. You paid to the military fund and the military fund created these weapons and we're giving these weapons out from the military fund of taxpayers that paid this 10 years ago. It doesn't matter.
And don't get me wrong, I'm all in support of a strong military, but there's definitely a military industrial complex that benefits strongly from that. Everybody's bankrolling through the government in different ways, one or another. I just think it's interesting that the next highest donors of military aid to Ukraine was the UK, and that was at $7.16 billion. So,
yeah, and I mean, it took forever for Germany to get involved and just send these tanks over too, but
because we've given almost 7 times what the UK has sent over.
Bro, the UK is a shamble. It is a ghost.
Yeah,
don't get me
wrong. Yeah. I'm not saying the UK.
It's a ghost of what it was.
There. Yeah. the old
anything
empire.
More, and they'll literally have to rejoin the EU just to survive. Like they can't afford it. They got to pay Prince Charles his yearly dues.
Hey, that's King Charles to you.
Yeah, it's rapist Charles to me, sir.
Oh man. All right.
The artist formerly known as Prince.
No, don't disrespect Prince like that.
So we actually are coming up on our 2-hour mark here.
Holy shit! Wow.
I'll be honest, I didn't think we were gonna have that
2-hour limit. Wow.
So we'll do final thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Russia sucks.
Yeah, so
Fuck you,
here's
whale.
what's
Fuck you,
interesting.
dolphin.
So yeah, when we first did this a couple months ago, it was right after the Kiev
The invasion.
The
invasion
invasion
was
of Kiev.
repelled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So we were coming fresh off that.
and we were like, oh, interesting, and we still didn't really know what Russia's strength was.
No.
We had heard that there were a lot of people trying to like leave Russia and everything like that, but we didn't know exactly what that meant. And now it's very clear that all of that was truth in reporting. And like I said, it's, I think, and you got to wonder if he knows this when he like sits at home or whatever, but I think it's the end of Putin, man. I think he's worn out his welcome.
Yeah.
And
I think this was his ride into the sunset.
Yep. And someone else is going to take his place. And going back to what I was talking about earlier, I think that is going to officially be the person that either makes or breaks Russia. And that's not metaphorical. That's literal. So if it was like that Wagner guy, group guy, he would probably break it, right?
He's gonna break Russia, yeah, if he gets in power.
So very interesting to think about. Crazy to see something like this happening in our lifetime because our parents haven't seen anything like this.
No.
And our grandparents, they saw Korea and
well, there was Vietnam in the 60s and 70s. Our parents saw that.
Yeah, that was the war, but I'm talking about like
the
restructuring of an entire.
I mean, Korea is the best.
Oh,
example.
like yeah. I mean, well, in the 90s is when the USSR fell, and
they fell, but it wasn't like
a takeover or something.
Yeah, it wasn't like this weird hard reset. It was just like, hey, we suck at this.
I mean, not that they're exactly the same, but I'd say the closest things were in the last 100 years. You've got Korea, like we said, and then Bosnia.
Bosnia, Czech,
Mm-hmm.
Bosnian uprising, North and South Korea, North Vietnam, South Vietnam. We had a bunch of stuff in Africa, but nothing to this scale. If Russia falls right now as it is, it'll probably be the biggest event since World War II.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because, I mean, if Russia falls, you're talking about a restructuring of a large portion of Asia.
Mm-hmm. And you know that China's going to try to get involved because those oil fields in Russia.
Yeah. As a matter of fact,
can you imagine getting sent a map in the mail, be like, "Hey, we had to reprint this," and you just see China reaching over this way.
This is why I believe that they will not let Russia fail, is because the EU would rather have Russia survive and keep its oil fields than have it fall to China.
100%.
They will not let Russia fall in the hands of a global power grab.
Yeah, that is one of the leg ups that China would need to really start being imposing again.
Mm-hmm. Can you imagine China the size of Russia and China combined?
Oh my god,
that is a big superpower with a lot of resources.
It's a big super freaking nope is what it is.
Yeah, at that point you just preemptively attack. Like there's nothing you can do. You can't let them build their society to the point.
Well, and I mean at that point we gotta extend the wall.
Yeah. At that point, we start to get Saudi. We gotta do a wall all the way down that parallel.
Great Wall of China. They're just gonna loop it back around down into Russia.
Yeah. I'm like, what are you supposed to do?
The PRRC, the People's Republic of Russia, China.
Russia, China. China, Russia.
Russo, China.
Yeah.
PRRC.
God, what a scary thought.
I'm calling it. Oh my god, dude. I want $1,000.
PRRC.
PRRC. If that becomes the acronym, I want $1,000 from everyone.
From everyone that ever existed.
Yep. That's all it is, man.
Dang.
They listen to this.
You like copyright it?
What we do though,
You know what? That sounds pretty good.
we all get rich at that point because we pass Gooch off as the next Nostradamus.
I see it. It's here. I see it all.
The Russians.
He's either going to be holed up in a stone tower in some village, just making predictions, or he's going to start making like a show, like South Park or The Simpsons.
The next tablet of Mike has been released.
Yeah. The tablet of Mike. Tablet of Gooch.
The Gooch tablet has been announced.
Yeah. Meanwhile, he's just in a room like cracking fortune cookies. Just sitting there snapping those things like a psycho, and he's like, "Oh,
go back to you like."
Found the
prophecy.
Found the next one. Live, laugh, love.
I see peace and prosperity for the future.
Prosperity for future those that deserve. Oh. Oh my God! Yeah, we don't. We're all a bunch of idiots here, guys. But you're listening. We're just
makes it so great.
We're just making our assumptions based on what we think is going to happen. But
yeah, there's very little educated guessing to this.
Very much so. It's just basically a bunch of drunk assholes trying to make a decision. Like we're doing what the British did to India. Just get a bunch of drunk people together and decide what's going to happen. Just like, all right, this is the rule.
Yep, we've decided the fate of the universe.
I am pretty confident that Ukraine will come out on top in this.
That's my prediction.
Yeah. It would take Tom Brady joining the Russian side for this comeback to come through. Okay.
That's fair.
Tom Brady.
If anybody can lead him, it's
God and anime on my side.
The power of the weeaboo protects me. Oh my goodness.
Anything else?
No, I think we covered it.
All right.
No, I'm just waiting for them to pull out some like secret He-Man and Masters of the Kremlin.
Skeletor emerges.
Skeletor. He-Man.
Putin's final emergence.
Well, thank you to everyone that's listening to this. And we know we were on a long break, like we said, but we really don't want to be done with this, I don't think. I really like doing it. So we will continue the best that we can. Mm-hmm. And as always, spread it out to all your friends, family, people you like, people you don't like. The more people that listen, the better our show can be.
Spread it like butter on a piece of multigrain toast.
Yes, nothing like fiber in the morning.
Multigrain toast, you fucking savage.
So, but yes, thank you to all of you, and as always, stay ordinary, my friends.
Bye, guys. As always, everyone, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Drunk with Questions.
Drunk with Questions wouldn't be possible without incredibly ordinary individuals such as yourselves. Make sure you join the Drunk with Questions crew every Sunday on your preferred podcast streaming website. Don't forget to like, follow, comment, and subscribe on all of our social media pages. And feel free to reach out to us by email at any time.